half hour about cricket. With balls should be explain what the
The Conservatives have suspended one of their MPs, Mark Menzies, from the Parliamentary Party after claims in the Times that he misused party funds. Mr. Menzies, who represents Hyde in Lancashire, told the paper that he strongly disputed the allegations. The Conservatives are investigating the claims. The government's plan to send some scientists to Rwanda to conduct another setback last night, but the House of Lords again calling for changes. Both want to see an exemption for those who work for the UK government as military abroad. It's also renewed their demand that Rwanda cannot be treated as a safe country unless the government provides a guaranteed deterrent from an independent monitoring party. The Scottish government is expected to make a statement in Holyrood this afternoon, confirming that it's abandoning its flagship target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030. Its news reaffirms that annual climate targets could also be scrapped. The Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron will join other ministers from the group of 7 leading industrial nations for a meeting in Italy, where the crisis in the Middle East is expected to dominate discussions. Plus, the measures against Iran in response to the attack on Israel are likely to be considered. Allies are urging Israel to show restraint. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted his country will make its own decisions. Police have broken up an international cyber group devising scammers with the technology to trick victims into paying online. Almost 40 people were arrested worldwide. Their victims are thought to include around 70,000 people in the UK. The investigation also seized data from firm servers, providing details of criminals who use these servers and of their victims. The police are contacting 25,000 people, warning them that there has been a call. A new study suggests there's been an increase in smoking among women of Indian or African backgrounds. Researchers from University College London looked at data spanning a decade up to 2023 and said it was concerning to see the rise. Smoking among women from lower socioeconomic groups fell obesity.
Thank you, Jane. It's 28 minutes to 8. Made in China was a label that used to be trainers and t-shirts back to the back of the box. The so-called factory report has been struggling to recover because of technical problems. The global counter, although these days you might still find that paper China will forever electric car massive investments in solar panels. It's the Chinese have been told by other competitors that they won't be too much and recognize this and China does want to avoid that.
All about
their jobs in these things, went into debt and refused to sell their companies. We can see that many companies suffer decline in demands and exports. The managers face a lot of financial pressure and even have to close their factories. We chose to focus on trade, so we don't have pressure on production.
It is some struggle with China's vast capacity to build as leaders in Europe and the United States on edge. In an exhibition park in Beijing, thousands of Korean technology companies are showing off their latest products, focusing on convenience and storage. Among them is Siltest Yelp.
Because like the capacity in China to produce this kind of green energy.
I think the Chinese company is leading the whole energy storage market with innovation, with new technologies. Right now, I think 80 to 90% of energy storage units are designed and manufactured in China. So we are leading the market in the whole world.
But Europe and the United States were trying to save its growing economy by producing high-priced, state-subsidized green technology to sell abroad. This tactic, they argue, is driving down the demand for solar panels and other emerging technology and private aircraft out of Europe. Back online, men lives in this video in bed. The support for his children on the table. The furniture company owns a clever company that created them done significant so employing them for 40 years to come back. As President Xi Jinping gets into his fortunes from what he describes as new productive forces, then it's a reminder of what's going to happen to the dedicated workforce that doesn't pay off.
Well, China goes on the war with the party. It's the exact industry. Mr. Thompson University, all of them are from coming from I said back in the program that how should we read this as a sign of confidence in the Chinese economy or the ruthlessness with which China can switch from manufacturing t-shirts to something else?
Puts it at the level of really upper middle income countries. So what it has to do is shift from low cost to high value added manufacturing and services. And China therefore does what it normally does, which is when it wants to do that, it has directed a huge amount of state resources, subsidies, and indeed a plan called China Made in China 2025 to try and shift the economy. But as Laura, your correspondent there just suggested, one of the hardest things about the transition is actually the people. You can invest a lot machinery, but can you actually transition the people? And part of the slowdown growth this year is a reflection of the challenge of the structural change. And of course, it's not doing it in isolation. It's under huge amounts of global tension in the United States, which of course doesn't make sense.
Well, let's turn to what it means for the American economy for us here as well. So in that way, the potential is so sensitive is the fundamental of our policies using solar panels compared to the actual normal fences. And we heard the other day that Tesla is now being outsold by the Chinese manufacture of electric cars. Do you think we can see the beginning of yet more trade tensions?
Yes, and in fact, it was just before the measure looking at essentially subsidies targeted at U.S. systems for solar panels as well. And one of the challenges of trying to structural change is it doesn't consume enough at home of everything it's producing, so therefore it is being exported. I think the Chinese would argue that during the New Deal in the United States Inflation Reduction Act, everybody is subsidizing, but I would just put some context around it, which is China has spent more on local investment than other countries for this reason, because they're trying to shift their growth. So even though we do need to do renewables, I think the question of the level playing field is going to be the next frontier of tension amongst, I ought to add, many others.
Thank you very much indeed. Explain the papers to them. Papers, small inside pages go further than what you can buy and telegraph. The Reading University, not behind Dubai Daily. So the University of Reading has had to deny its cloud seeding technique is blamed for the extreme flooding in Dubai in recent months. They're the worst rainfall there since records began. Meteorologists, experts at the University working with the over the past few years, they say the projects to electrically charge clouds and produce raindrops that they've been entirely unlikely to some experts say that they benefit from seeing that clouds that already produce substantial amounts of rain. Dramatic pictures of those floods on the front page of Guardian their residents wading through a Dubai street. A year and a half rain in 24 hours. In the Guardian. It is now 9:19 there. So cricket is in a pickle over balls. In a bid to help develop England's future Test cricketers, the Australian-made Kookaburra has replaced the traditional Duke's ball for the opening 2 rounds of this year's County Championship. The Kookaburra's introduction, it was recommended back in 2022 by Andrew Strauss's High Performance Review. It's been designed to mimic overseas conditions so that it equips English cricketers for future tours, including, of course, Ashes tours of Australia. But it is controversial. Here is England's most successful ever fast bowler, Jimmy Anderson, speaking on the Tailenders podcast about why he prefers to bowl with a Duke.
The Duke, for some reason, just swings more and for longer. Kookaburra doesn't swing as long. As you mentioned, it's got slightly flatter seam, or different seam. Actually, I think, without getting too technical, the actual rope or whatever's used, string for the seam, it feels thinner. Oh. And on the Duke it feels thicker. So it feels like it goes into the pitch more and it does more like seam. It feels different in the hand, definitely.
Right, what's going on? Abby Zoltan's on the line. Comedian, podcaster, TMS cricket statistician, and Michael Vaughan as well. Good morning to you both. Good morning. And Zoltan, what is going on? Which ball do you prefer?
Well, what's been going on is that it's April is the coolest month for County Championship bowlers. So it's been the toughest month for bowling in County Championship history so far in terms of runs per wicket. Over 45 runs per wicket so far in the 2000 County Championship matches. There's never been a worse month to be a bowler in the championship. In terms of which I prefer, there's been times where the Duke ball does too much. I think the Kookaburra has done too little. I mean, some sort of balance between the two, and they are mixing it up through the championship this year. Whether the Kookaburra needs to do a bit more, the Duke a bit less. I think that's been a bit less responsive. But that delicate balance between batting and bowling that is at the very heart of cricket is something that the game has been tinkered with for years. And there have been periods where there were very small seams on the ball in the years leading up to the Second World War, for example, and there were lots of runs stored, and then there's been other times when the bowlers have dominated. So it swings one way than the other. So far, had just one positive result out of 15 matches. A lot of that is due to the weather, but also due to very high scores.
Yeah, and is that not good enough, Michael? Does that damage cricket?
Absolutely not. I think it's exactly what cricket needs. I think if you look at the 4-day system in the UK, there's 14 4-day games. I think 4 of the games can be played with the Kookaburra ball. So I think Rob Key's doing exactly the right thing in trying to develop players, not just for English conditions with the Duke ball, but if you want to go and be successful over a period of time in India, in Australia, in South Africa, you've got to get used to bowling with the Kookaburra ball as well. So I think 4 out of 14 games, I'd go half and half. I'd have 7 and 7. I think Rob would prefer the whole of the county championship to be bowled with the Kookaburra. I don't think they'd have any bowls left if that was the case. They'd all be a few feet under, but I think what they're trying to do is trying to develop as many cricketers that can play all the way around the world as much as possibly can. In 2023, started the first 2 rounds of county championship, 11% of the overs were bowled by spin. 2024, 43% of the overs over the last couple of weeks have been bowled by spin. So surely that has to be a positive.
But then, I've actually just had a text from someone saying one team bats for hours, days, gets 600 odd runs for like 3 batters out, then the other team scores 650 runs for 2 out. It's bonkers and pointless, this anonymous texter
say.
It's got a point, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, what Rocket P's trying to do, and it won't happen now, it's not going to happen overnight, but the more you can get used to bowling with the Kookaburra ball, what you require, Jimmy Anderson's been the perfect example. When he first started, back in whenever, 2022, he was a big booming outswinger, and over years he's developed, and again, the criticism of Jimmy at the early stages was that he couldn't bowl with the Kookaburra ball, because he didn't kind of have enough skills. Well, he's developed all those skills, and that's all this is saying. If you want to bowl overseas with a Kookaburra ball, you can't just land it on the left and let the pitch and the ball do the
And
rest.
that's the point, isn't it, Andy Wilson? So we want to be entertained by cricketers when they go abroad, and the good of the game, the commercial good of the game. We've got to succeed abroad, and if this is the trick, then we've got to do it.
Yes, and as Michael pointed out, there's been a lot more spin so far in the championship, way more than in previous seasons at this stage. I mean, in 1990 they changed the ball and had run with a very small seam. I think for sort of similar reasons to rectify that balance, and that led to a sort of a very, very high scoring summer. And just 15 years later, Michael's team won the Ashes of England, and just 20 years later, Andrew Strauss's team won it in Australia. So we've only got a decade and a half to wait for this debate.
Andy Wilson and Michael Walker, thank you very much. So there's 13 minutes. Start the talk today. Speaker in the studio with me this morning, Reverend Lucy McGill,
Good morning. When I was growing up in the 1970s and 80s, it was commonplace to come back from a cafe with your clothes smelling of smoke. I didn't think twice about it. Movie stars, TV celebrities smoking looked, to my eyes, really cool. And adverts for this lifestyle choice were everywhere. It was normal. The House of Commons took the first step this week in making the sale of cigarettes illegal. Someone who's 15 today, still runs its course, will never be able to buy a packet of cigarettes legally. Cigarettes will go from being ubiquitous to invisible in just a few decades. It's a big cultural change. And legislation is one of the instruments that a democratic society has to make such change. But I was reminded again, as I listened to the debate, that just as influential in the way we live as legal and economic arrangements the business of government are the stories we tell, the songs we sing, the myths we share, the images we carry of ourselves, and the purpose we have for the future. It's said that at the beginning of the smoking craze in England, after tobacco arrived along with potatoes from the 1580s onwards, it was the image of the pipe-smoking adventurers that made tobacco attractive. What made it even more appealing, perhaps, was that the church said it was simple and bounded. King James I wrote that smoking was a custom loathsome, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, dangerous to the lungs, and nearest resembled the horrible sticky smoke of the Japanese buttons. He thus associated it with hell. Those living with lung cancer or grieving the loss of a loved one who smoked wouldn't disagree. But at the heart of the story of smoking, along with the policy discussions and public health arguments, is a thoroughly recognisable struggle. We might try our best to live a life well for others and for ourselves, but we don't always behave that way. St. Paul put it succinctly, "For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do." At the heart of the story of smoking is human contradiction, sometimes contrariness, sometimes flat-out addiction. But along the way, a battle of wills that goes to the heart of what it is to be human. For some, it is smoking, for others it will be something else. Caught between desire, regret, stubbornness, and need. Smoking, its endorsement and suppression, is a parable for our time.
And that was all for today with Lucy Winter. The time is 10 to 8. Opportunities for plumbers, for electricians, welders and workers in every single nation and region of the country. That is what Labour is promising today with its plan for the renovation of our ports. £1.8 billion is the cost. The suggestion is that investment comes from the British Green Prosperity Plan. That plan, of course, must be watered down. It was initially £28 billion to be spent every year of a Labour government on climate issues, funded by borrowing. That was then ditched in February. The new sum is much smaller, £4.7 billion a year, on top of £10 billion of green schemes that the government already committed to. Let us talk to Edmund about the shadow safety statement. And Net Zero, good morning. Good morning. Starting with the board, what is the plan? Why is it turning?
What we're announcing today is the biggest investment in ports in carbon preservation more than multi-million dollars. And it's massive because it's the key renewable industry that our ports are absolutely fundamental to us being able to manufacture here and then ship those massive turbines out to the sea. It's also helped us with our supply chain, and it's all part of our plan to create clean, homegrown power, the biggest investment in clean, homegrown power this country has ever seen. And it's part of the wider choice, I think, of these local elections and the general election. This country is crying out for economic change. This government is not going to deliver it. Lay plan.
Really annoying me, there's a glitch on the line, but we've got to think the sense of what you were saying there. Where is this money going to come from?
This is part of the Green Prosperity Plan, Justin, that we have, which is funded in part by a windfall tax.
The verdict of unlawful killing has been delivered in the inquest into a fire at the Zeppelin nightclub in 1981. 48 people who'd been attending a St. Valentine's Day disco died at the Stardust Club. The inquest began last April and have heard from 370 witnesses. The Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris paid tribute to the families, saying they never gave up on justice for their loved ones. Thank you, Anne. Now, another Conservative view in the headlines. Market. Time for the council next week. The purpose of getting I fully complied with all the rules and declarations, she said. There is an investigation. There's been some job this morning. Look, it's not the first to be caught up in alleged scandal or controversy. 8 MPs who were elected as Conservatives in 2019 are now sitting as independents, having been and that is in addition to a number who have stepped down and are no longer MPs. The comparison, another 7. Well, MPs allegedly misbehaving, it's not a new phenomenon. I spoke to the former Milton, a deputy chief whip for the Conservatives, and asked, what does she make of the number of allegations over MPs' behaviour that have come up in this parliament?
There have been a lot of cases, and one has to be slightly careful making comparisons from now and previously, because it could be that more people are coming forward with complaints, and so you never know whether the incidence has been increasing or whether there's just better reporting methods, more people are coming forward.
That's an important distinction. Is this a real phenomenon or a reporting phenomenon? What's your instinct on that?
It's probably a bit of both. I think there is a feeling that people are more able to report things. Maybe they feel that their complaints or their concerns will be taken more seriously. I think the bit that doesn't feel quite right yet is how investigations take place.
Yeah, well, let's talk about investigations and how parties deal with this. You've been in the Whip's office when you were an MP. Some difficult cases came up when you were there. What are the instincts when the case comes to you? Is it to cover up? Is it personal welfare of the person involved?
Well, cover-up is never an option if you're doing your job properly. I've always felt that political parties were not best placed to do investigations. I think that what matters in an investigation is that you have to do things quickly. In fairness to both the person who's making the allegations and the person who thinks the allegations have been made, and both sides, if you like, have to have confidence that the system is fair, and sometimes that will mean giving support to both
both sides of this.
I mean, in this particular case, Mark Menzies, it does appear the party had known something was being alleged, and we hadn't really heard about it till it came to the Times newspaper. And then obviously maybe new information came forward, as was suggested in the radio interview, but it is the day that the Times reported it that he lost the win.
That's right, and I mean, I don't know that it is always appropriate to make public when allegations are received, but what matters is that whoever receives those allegations must act in a timely fashion. They really, it's just not fair to the accuser or the person against whom allegations are made.
Is there something going on with selection? And I don't just mean the selection by parties, local parties, of who their candidate for election should be, but also the people who are selecting themselves to be in politics.
I think that some people who go into politics don't entirely understand what they're putting themselves into. Your privacy is quite what it was, and you carry some responsibility too, because you are in the public eye.
Yeah, there should be some training for MPs on how to comport yourself, conduct yourself in private, in order for that, your private life, not to interfere with your political and public life.
Well, it always seems a bit of a shame to me that people need to be told what is, I think, blindingly obvious, and that is, if you're in a position of responsibility or in the public eye, you probably, I would say, should conduct yourself to the highest standards in everything you do.
Now, in terms of politics, party politics, what do the voters make of individual allegations against them?
I think it has an impact. I think Boris Johnson's premiership had an impact on all that went on there. And I think that the public are sadly a great deal more cynical about politicians than they were before. And I think quite a lot of damage has been done to democracy because of that. It's not going to be the reason people vote one way or the other. It will reinforce their beliefs and prejudices. If they didn't like the Conservative Party anyway, then this will be another reason why they don't like the Conservative Party.
Anne Milton there, who was Deputy Chief Whip in under David Cameron and Theresa May. Let's talk to someone who goes back a little bit in the history of the Conservative Party. Lord Heseltine, Michael Heseltine, former Deputy Prime Minister, there in that Parliament between 92 and 97, when there were some headlines made. Lord Heseltine, thank you so much for joining us. And I wonder whether, as we see headlines at the moment around individual MPs, whether that brings back memories of the Parliament, that memorable Parliament of the 90s.
Well, there have been such incidents from time immemorial, and the idea that politicians are sort of popular is simply not true. On public opinion tests, from what I remember, we're at the bottom of the pile, along with estate agents and journalists. It was us. And it's not difficult to understand why. We only have to take the decisions that other people can't take or won't take. And every time you take a decision, the people who support you nod and think how wise. Those who disagree with you hate you and say you didn't listen and you don't care. And you can make an awful lot of enemies in just 24 hours because you have so many decisions to take. So there's nothing new in politics. What is also the case is that these issues, whilst of major interest to the media, actually make very little difference to the general public. What they're interested in is the living standards and their ability to enjoy a more prosperous life. If the government is delivering, it gets re-elected. I think this is strange.
But so you're not one who thinks there's been anything peculiar in this regard, this behaviour of MPs regard of this Parliament, because many are saying it feels like there are more cases of MPs losing the whip, MPs resigning, MPs being sanctioned by a committee or whatever, than we've been used to.
Well, somebody better get out a slide rule and measure it and to produce some statistics. I've got no idea. All I know is that there were always such scandals, and the public knows that in every town there is always a bad apple. But that doesn't mean stop eating apples or stop electing members of parliament.
Let me
me ask you this. As you observe politics, and you've made a very eloquent case to say it's an unpopular job, as you observe politics, do you think the public and the media are too hard on MPs? That we expect too much from them?
We set ourselves up and we have to be prepared to take the flat if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Well, I raise it because there's an interesting case at the moment around Angela Rayleigh, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and her housing arrangements. Was she in this main residence here? Did she avoid capital gains tax of a few thousand quid by saying this house was her main residence rather than the other one and the like? And there's been a debate about whether that is a concocted scandal by those who are making political mischief out of trying to reduce her reputation, or whether that is a legitimate and important scandal for journalists and others to investigate. And I wonder where you are on that.
I haven't got the first idea. How can I? I've got no facts, I don't know the lady, and I never comment on the Mercy side of politics unless I'm specifically. I'm not in this case.
But is it, are we allowing our political to distract by discussions of everything else? We are about we are about what MPs actually do, holding to account their actual decisions.
Well, the media love these stories, and they have sensationalism all built into them, and crime, crime alive, that's just from hell. If you ask me, does it really make any difference to the conduct of affairs? No, it doesn't. The depressing thing about the present situation is the seriousness of Britain's economic difficulties and the need for a general election that conducts a very mature, frank, honest debate in which people can make decisions on a rational basis. And what frightens me is that we may be heading to an election in which the grubby side of politics plays a bigger role, whereas the urgency is to deal with the major people challenges that this country faces. I don't know what.
Who do you want to win the general election?
Well, if I'm a member of the Conservative Party, I'm not going to recommend it to anyone from any other party. But do I want my party fully put together? Yes, of course I do. I think there is an agenda, not the Conservative agenda. It's pro-European, it's devolution of power, trusting the people, and one in which you create a partnership right up and down the country, backed by government support and public money, not extra money, existing money that's used in a more constructive way, local cooperation, and the participation of directly elected mayors across the country. Because at the moment we've got a system which is partially effective in the urban areas, and I'm proud to say that it doesn't proceed. But secondly, in the more rural and county areas, we've got hundreds of local councillors, which we simply have no need for.
You say you obviously are a Conservative here, and you say you're a Conservative, but I just feel there's a massive gap between where you are and what you've just described, and someone like Liz Truss, who was a favourite of the members, such a favourite who became the elected leader, the Prime Minister.
Yes, but what you have to ask the question is, who left the Conservative Party? Liz Truss or me?
We'll leave it there. Lord, it's time. Thanks so much. Politics and it's now 17 Two men have been arrested in Germany accused of spying for Russia and planning attacks on military targets. The Russian ambassador in Berlin has been summoned by the German Foreign Ministry. The Coventry Building Society has agreed to take over the Cooperative Bank in a deal worth up to £780 million. And the Football Association has scrapped FA Cup replays from the first round proper. Thanks, Alan. We'll come back to the news that the husband of the former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has been re-arrested. We'll come back to that shortly. But let's talk more about the Scottish Government abandoning its key target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 75% in 2030. It abandoned it because it wasn't going to meet it, which raises the question that politics in the UK haven't been obsessed with setting targets but not really striving to deliver them. The target to abolish child poverty by 2020 is perhaps
welfare, but for good reasons or bad, we chose to do that as a government, just to follow the target rather than hitting it. It is very easy to set targets, maybe end up as a pleasant political distraction to the awkward task of actually delivering things. I spoke to Daisy Powell-Turnbull, head of energy and environment at Public First, who's advised successive governments, and Joe Tanner, former advisor to Boris Johnson, former Conservative communications officer. First, I asked him if there was a tendency to announce targets with fanfare, even if there was no idea how to achieve them.
There's always a desire to divert attention away from a particular problem, to show that you decided to take some action, and sometimes these targets are actually things that are unlikely to be met or even fully measured in the time that you're in office. So there's of course a temptation to do that, and we know that particularly when the back is against the wall, a particular minister may feel inclined to launch an action plan. It's about showing some sense of momentum. You know, we're going to do something, we know to probably recognise it, but it doesn't mean that the target is necessarily correctly set at the time or realistic. It could be being set in a vacuum.
Daisy, let's think about environmental targets in particular, a subcategory of all the different targets that might be set by politicians for one thing or another. Talk us through the purpose of them, when they're useful and when they're just aspiration and whatnot.
The decision to move the UK up to a net zero by 2050 target, for example, has been broadly seen as a really positive move. It's catalysed change not only in the UK, showing that we're serious about reaching that number, but it has also really changed the debate internationally. I think, though, what the Scottish decision shows is two things. First of all, you can be too ambitious, and second of all, probably annual targets are usually a mistake. It may sound like a good idea holding yourself to account regularly, but there are other mechanisms for doing that aren't just targets.
But Daisy, this is really difficult because one of the things you can criticise the long-term targets here is that 2050 target is no one who's in government now will be in government then. So there's literally nobody you can hold to account for that target. Politicians elected in 2050 can't be held to account for us not reaching it.
Exactly. So you do need it to target. That makes sense. You do need monitoring. But I think what mostly the countries, businesses, individuals need from government in these targets is clarity and consistency.
Now, Joe, I want you to put your political brain to work here. If I'm a politician and I announce a target and then I fail to deliver, how much political pain do I suffer from that?
It's a question, I guess, for politicians very generally about how much personal sort of stock do you place on that target? How much is it just a departmental target? When you look at the approach that Rishi Sunak has taken with we will stop the vote, we will halve inflation, you know, the sorts of these are my pledges. I think it does matter about when they are set. It also matters on the narrative that is established at the time about how much of it is your own sort of I'm going to do this, or whether it's more, you know, we as a government are going to do something, and almost bringing people into the fact that it's a complicated picture and there are other factors that are going to be at play. But you know, the public are pretty cynical. They first of all, some of these big numbers or far away times seem quite unattainable or unrealistic. The reality then is, what do you tell the public and what do the public buy into? They're pretty cynical and they think, well, actually, I don't really think this makes any sense anyway. They almost price in that they know it's not going to happen. But actually, if it's something quite big, people think, oh, no, that affects my life. I want to know it is going to change. And they will feel taken quite let down personally.
Daisy, what are the sort of intermediate targets other than net zero?
The big ones that we're looking at the moment are grid decarbonisation. As a country, we've done an amazing job of decarbonising our electricity system, and now the debate is raging about how fast we're going to do the final bits of that. Then on a more public-facing front, the big targets that everyone's talking about are the EV target, where we're phasing out combustion fuels and moving towards EVs, and then also a decision on when boilers will be phasing out.
Gas boilers, yeah.
Indeed. Those are the big debates raging at the moment.
We should say, Daisy, come the next election, there will be a bit of a battle over a specific target on things like how quickly we decarbonise the electricity.
Yes, there absolutely will. There's a lot of consensus actually in policy, but dates on which we're going to have a zero carbon grid is definitely still up for grabs. The government has brought it forward to 2035, which was considered really quite ambitious at the time, but
Miliband then stood up a couple of conferences ago and said it was 2030 under a Labour government. That is getting quite close now, and the sector is really nervous about whether it's possible or not. But, and this is an argument for making more ambitious targets here, and Miliband says he knows that it's going to
Testimony tomorrow.
A man who spent 17 years in prison after being wrongly jailed for rape has been offered an unreserved apology. Andrew Malkinson had his conviction quashed last summer after protesting his innocence for years. The head of the body responsible for investigating miscarriages of justice said it had mishandled Mr. Malkinson's case. Here's our home and legal correspondent, Dominic Casciani.
This is the first time that Helen Pitcher, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, has apologised to Andrew Malkinson, who was exonerated by the Court of Appeal last July. He pleaded 3 times with the miscarriages body to help him prove his innocence, but on the first 2 occasions he failed to look at exonerating DNA evidence and the attack to another man. In a statement, Helen Pitcher said it's clear from a sobering report written by the independent barrister Chris Casey that the Commission had failed Mr. Malkinson. But that report hasn't been published because it appears to have raised questions about the conduct of other bodies, including Greater Manchester Police, which was responsible for the original investigation. CCRC says it cannot reveal the findings yet, in case they compromise a wider Ministry of Justice inquiry. Mr. Malkinson said that the time for the apology had been last summer, and the CCRC's leadership must be changed.
Government figures show the number of pupil suspensions in England has risen by nearly a third in a year. Teaching groups have warned that the data is the legacy of underinvestment. The government has insisted that it's targeting support to improve pupils' behaviour. Here's our education correspondent, Rebecca.
There were almost 260,000 suspensions in the spring term last year. This is an increase of more than 60,000 on the year before. Suspensions have soared since the pandemic and are 72% higher than in the same period in 2019. Permanent exclusions have also increased. There were more than 3,000 in England in the spring term last year. That's almost 1,000 more than the same period the year before. The most common reason for a child being suspended or excluded is persistent disruptive behaviour. Teaching unions are warning a shortage of funding, a lack of support for pupils with special educational needs, and long waits for mental health services are leading to an increase in challenging behaviour. James Bowie is from the National Association of Head Teachers.
There's no head teacher in the country that wants to use suspensions and exclusions. They are virtually always a last resort, and they'll always come after the school has tried a wide range of other strategies. One of the things that certainly contributes to the increase is the lack of early intervention services. I think we also probably have to look to the fact that we are seeing more and more pupils living in poverty. That could be a real risk factor.
The Department for Education says it's invested £10 million into behaviour hubs to help schools improve behaviour, attendance, and reduce the risk of exclusion.
The UK and the United States have announced new sanctions on Iran in response to last weekend's drone and missile attack on Israel. Another group of individuals, companies and military organisations have been added to existing lists of Iranians facing travel bans and diplomatic freezes. Foreign ministers from the G7 group of leading economies have been meeting to discuss the conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine. Our correspondent Jessica Parker reports from the Italian island of Capri.
Plans for fresh sanctions against Iran had been heavily advertised in advance. As G7 foreign ministers met, the UK and the US announced they'd be targeting people and organisations linked to Iran's drone and missile programme. The EU also promised further restrictive measures. These moves followed Iran's unprecedented attack on Israel, itself a response to a strike on the Iranian consulate in Syria. Britain's Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron spoke from the G7 meeting on the island of Capri.
Iran's behaviour is unacceptable, and it's right that countries come together here in this area and make those points, not just because of what Iran has been doing, but also as a message to Israel that we want to play our part in having a coordinated strategy that deals with Iran's aggression that we saw so clearly against Israel over the weekend.
The other central issue being discussed here is support for Ukraine. One idea is whether interest accrued on frozen Russian assets could be used to help finance Kyiv. Ukraine's pleas for further air defence systems are being loudly echoed. What's less clear is when and how they'll be answered. The Secretary-General of the NATO military alliance, Jens Stoltenberg, who's here in Capri, said conversations with partners were ongoing, while warning that Russia was pushing along the whole front line alongside waves of airstrikes.
2 men have been arrested in Germany on suspicion of spying for Russia. The men, who've been named as Dieter S. and Alexander J., are also accused of planning attacks on military targets to undermine support for Ukraine. They both have German-Russian dual citizenship. Our security correspondent Gordon Carrera has the details. Federal prosecutors say the men were arrested in Bavaria yesterday. One of them, who's believed to have fought with Russian-backed troops in Ukraine, is alleged to have carried out reconnaissance of potential targets, including US military facilities in Germany, and passed information to a person to Russian intelligence services. The second man is alleged to have assisted him. Germany has had a number of spy cases recently, but what sets this case apart is the claim that the suspects may have been planning acts of sabotage rather than just gathering intelligence. Prosecutors allege the intent was to undermine the military support provided to Ukraine, and German media have reported one target may have been the base where the US Army trains Ukrainians to use tanks. Such an attack would be a significant escalation. The Foreign Ministry in Berlin said it had summoned the Russian ambassador to discuss the arrests. You're listening to the 6 o'clock news on BBC Radio 4. The main news so far: the Scottish Government has scrapped its target of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by the end of the decade. Labour says the Conservatives must answer questions about the suspension of a backbench MP amid allegations he misused party funds after asking for money to pay off bad people. Still to come.
The red-imported fire ant is one of the world's worst invasive species, with everything from crops to beehives to livestock known to fall victim.
Fire ants. The Australian government is being urged to spend more to kill them off. Scotland's NHS has paused prescribing puberty blockers to children referred by its only gender identity clinic for under 18s. The decision comes a week after a review of gender services in England, which found that children have been let down by lack of research. Here's our Scotland correspondent, Paul.
As in other parts of the UK, Scotland has seen a rapid rise in the number of young people who say they have genital dysphoria. This has changed prescribing policy goes further than announced by NHS England in March. As well as pausing the prescription of puberty blockers for younger patients, it also applies for cross-sex hormones for 16 and 17-year-olds. The ASHRA, which was about services in England, found there wasn't enough evidence that giving puberty blockers to children was safe or effective. But the Scottish Greens MSP Ross Greer said he was worried about the effect this change in healthcare policy could have.
I'm massively concerned about the impact it will have on trans young people. We know that the mental health records for trans young people in Scotland and across the UK are terrible because of how difficult their lives are.
Scottish Conservatives, though, said the announcement was long overdue, and the clinician Dr. Vicky Bell, recently arrived in England, wrote a critical report about the Gender Identity Service there, has also welcomed the decision.
I think in years to come, we'll look back with a mixture of incredulity and horror that we allow the treatment to be given to children for which there was no evidence, and there was much critical concern about the harm.
Glasgow's Health Board, which runs the service at the Sandyford, Scotland's only specialist gender clinic for under 18s, has previously said that puberty blockers were being used in small numbers. It also said those who've already begun treatment will be allowed to continue.
An inquest jury in Dublin has found that 48 people who died in a fire in a nightclub in 1981 were unlawfully killed. The number of escapers were blocked when the blaze broke out inside the Stardust Club. Jennifer O'Leary.
When a small fire was first noticed inside the Stardust nightclub in the early hours of Valentine's morning 1981, some thought it was a special lighting effect, but most of the more than 800 young people there were dancing. Just minutes later, the music stopped. Flames licked the walls. Black smoke engulfed the ballroom. The ceiling collapsed. 48 people died. The youngest victim was 16, the oldest 27. A decades-long campaign for a second inquest by survivors and the victims' families culminated in today's
an electrical bolt. The jury also found that these exits were either locked, chained, or otherwise obstructed, hindering the victims as they struggled to get out. Spontaneous applause broke out in Dublin Coroner's Court from those present who have long stood up for the young victims who fell in the fire.
Figures from NHS Wales show that waiting lists for hospital treatments are growing again, with a record high of almost 600,000 patients still waiting to be seen. The target of eliminating 2-year waits has also been missed. Here's our Wales correspondent,
Government was hoping it had finally managed to ease the ever-swelling list for treatment in Wales, but the number of patients waiting fell to 3 months in a row. However, figures for February show the trend has reversed. There's now a record number of individual patients waiting to be seen. The target of eliminating 2-year waits has also been missed, while performance in A&E, ambulance response times, and the wait for cancer treatment was. All this matters beyond Wales, as Labour's running of the NHS has repeatedly been a point of attack for the Conservatives as we move ever closer to a general election. The Welsh Health Secretary, Labour's Luke Morgan, says the vast majority of patients in Wales are being seen on time, leaving record demand and industrial action by doctors to the recent decline.
local elections will be taking place in a fortnight's time in England and Wales. Among them are those hoping to become one of 10 elected mayors in England. One of the most keenly contested is in the West Midlands, where the Conservative Andy Street is seeking a third term against the backdrop of weak national opinion polls for the Tories. Our political editor Chris Mason is in Walsall, taking a look at the red step.
A novel innovation in how increasing swathes of England are now governed directly elected regional mayors. From London introducing the idea in 2000 to North Yorkshire and the East Midlands adopting the model for the first time now. Visibility being known entails brings accountability and a regional figure with a national platform. Here in the West Midlands, a keyboard contest. Conservative Andy Street twice a victor here, as Longbourn is party affiliation likely, and certainly is now.
I had to call it Mandango. It's that first name, and that's the pitch. We're not choosing the party to run the region, we're choosing individuals.
His Labour rival is Richard Parker, expected by many to win. He talks up bringing buses under public control, but has to defend Labour-run Birmingham City Council, which has cranked up council tax big time while cutting services.
So let's be clear, Birmingham has had many issues and mistakes have been made. But we can't afford the fact that the government has not been in budget for the City Council, and that's done a lot of damage.
Also chasing votes, Sunny Byrne, the Liberal Democrats, reportedly paid to Lady Williams, Green Siobhan Parker Nunez, Independent Ahmed Yaqub. The mayoral model remains a patchwork. Around half the electorate in England are able to vote for one in a fortnight, but they are currently fashionable. Conservatives and Labour like the idea, they are likely to fall.
In the city, the 100 share index ended the day up 29 points at 7,877. On Wall Street, a short time ago, the Dow Jones was up 55 points at 37,809. The currency markets, the pound is trading at $1.24.5. The euro sterling is at €1.60.9. Euro 85.6 pence. Irish broadcaster Nick McGovern presenter of the 24 Woman's Hour, still hosting the show from Monday to Wednesday each week, replacing Paul Barnett, who will join the Today programme next month. Nick McGovern said she was looking forward to reuniting with Woman's Hour listeners after presenting the show during Emma Barnett's maternity leave. The Football Association has announced that there will be no longer FA Cup replays if the fixture ends in a draw. The move is aimed at accommodating an increasingly dense roster of games in European competitions, but lower league clubs say they need the financial boost from fixtures against top-flight teams. Our sports correspondent Laura Scott.
Hereford side is the one that drew 2-2 at Newcastle.
Addison number 6 is the only full-time professional, but 7 of them have got footballing experience.
Three plays after a fixture ends in a draw are part of FA Cup folklore. And in the case of Hereford versus Newcastle United in 1972, will go down in history. Moments of sporting magic, but over the years they've also been a crucial boost to the finances of lower league clubs. These opportunities have now been consigned to the history books, as a major overhaul of the FA Cup means that from the first round proper onwards, all ties will be decided in one game. The FA Cup changes will strengthen the competition, necessary to address the increased fixture congestion driven by the extraction of UEFA and English competitions. The decision was backed by Premier League clubs, whilst the top five will give £33 million more in funding to the grassroots game. The move was full of criticism. Campaign group Fair Game said it was a short-sighted move that was a nail in the coffin for the already crumbling football pyramid.
Prince William has returned to public duties for the first time since the Princess of Wales announced that she was being treated for cancer. He's visited a charity in Surrey that distributes surplus food to people in need. A number of volunteers gave him Get Well cards for his wife and for the King, who's also been treated for cancer. Taylor Swift's new album appears to have been leaked online a day before its release. People have been sharing tracks on social media claiming they're from the SARS 11th studio album, The Talking Poets Department. Some fans have speculated the songs could be fakes generated by artificial intelligence, while others have vowed to wait until tomorrow to support the official release. A parliamentary inquiry has called on the Australian government to boost spending on a programme aimed at eradicating red fire ants, an invasive species thought to have arrived from South America in shipping containers. Experts say the insects pose a threat to humans and livestock. Phil Mercer reports from Sydney.
Sniffer dogs are on the front line in the fight against a formidable invader. A Senate report says Australia's efforts to eradicate fire ants have been hampered by a lack of money and too much red tape.
Oh, no, that's classic. See all these with wings? Females ready to fly?
Fire ants, some of them big die, meaning invincible, are one of the world's worst invasive species.
Dr. Pam Swepson has worked on Australia's national fire ant eradication programme.
Any country that's been invaded by them has never been able to eradicate.
The very important fire ant is one of the world's worst invasive species, with everything from crops to beehives to livestock known to fall victim.
The Australian Academy of Science warns the insects have the potential to drive some animal and plant.
Spend the entire lunch squeezing your head between the railings, no matter how good it feels to be stretched. You will smile at the other girls, and you will not get distracted by how itchy tights are. You will sit still, and don't do that weird hand clapping thing, and don't collect everyone's pencil sharpeners. Today, you will keep top of Harry Potter, so not all of it. I assumed that everyone else was doing the exact same thing, psyching themselves up to pierce me. I didn't know I was different, like on a medically diagnosable level. I just thought I was quirky. The dream, when I was a baby, was to become the genius in a ragtag group of adventuring things. The movies really gave me a hot sense of what was going on in the four walls of my house. In the film The Goonies.
The Goonies? That was comedy.
No, The Goonies. It's a film from 1985 about a group of children who save their parents' home from a commercial real estate agent with gems that found in a pirate ship while being chased by bank robbers and a man called Sloth who shouts, "Hey, you guys!"
With Bill in that.
Go away.
This is where you don't have friends.
The Goonies sold me a dream of defeating armed mass murderers with not more than guile, friendship, and keeping chatting teeth attached to a slinky. I have the scars on my fingers from my granddad's soldering iron, and I can inform you that there is no world in which a slinky attached to a belt with dentures at the end can save you from a pit filled with spikes. Goonies may never say die, but in the real world, Data's dead, and in the real world, I wasn't the smart one in a real crew of unsupervised children on an epic adventure. I did try.
try. I once attached sparklers to my Fisher Price roller skates, on safety modes working for the Euro, obviously, and I approached some local youths, inviting them to solve a crime with me.
Hello there, good sir. I've just finished a great educational series about the plight of the peregrine falcon. Would you like to assist me in protecting this bird of prey from hawkers? No? I want the insect.
Needless to say, the children gave up, and I couldn't get away because the safety mode on my skates had jammed, forcing me to stay in place as they punched my big-brained head. The poaching of rare bird eggs was something I was constantly worried about as a child,